All right, so my name is Bobby Goodrich. I am the development director at the Poema Foundation. We are a nonprofit here in North Texas that fights human trafficking. We do that in three ways. We have an education wing where we are really involved in making sure that our communities are equipped to recognize and prevent the circumstances that lead to sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. We also have an outreach ministry where we coordinate with a team of private investigators. We have teams that launch all over the Metroplex. We have about 19 different campuses now that go out once a month with posters of kids who have gone missing from those local communities. We take them to places of business. We take them to places that runaway kids might go to, things that are open 24 hours, Walmart, Whataburger, things like that. We also take them to places that potential traffickers might take them, so hotels, nail salons, things like that. The startling statistic there is that the Department of Health tells us that on average, a runaway will be approached within about 72 hours by a potential trafficker. So we're really inviting the community to be eyes and ears looking for these kids and to see them return to safety. And then we also operate a safe house for adult female survivors of sex trafficking and exploitation. They come and they can enter any one of three different phases of treatment that we have. We have a kind of a stabilization phase. We have a therapeutic phase for them to be able to address and heal from the traumas that they've endured, and then also a transitional phase where they can learn the kind of practical life skills that they would need to relaunch into productive lives. The statistic there is that on average, people enter into trafficking between the ages of 12 and 14 on average. And so there's a lot of life skills that people just haven't developed that they need the opportunity to do so. So that's what we do.
Did you say how many houses you have?
We have one safe house. We have had, so that opened in 2017. Since then, we've had 35 women come through. We also offer services to others who don't actually end up coming into our house. Maybe they're still on the street and they're not ready to make that change. There have been a little over 300 women that we've supported through resourcing, through referrals to other places, things like that.
Thank you. Joe?
Hi guys, my name is Josephine Bryan and I am the founder of Hunger Free Philippines. Since I believe 2015, that's when we registered as a 501c3. So our nonprofit is pretty simple. It's feeding the hungry in the Philippines. Simple but yet very impactful because there's so many hunger in the Philippines. 64% of the population is experiencing hunger. So what we do is we partner with small churches in the Philippines. Last couple of months ago, as a matter of fact, my husband and I just came from the Philippines. What we do is we partners with really small churches all around the nation of the Philippines, and they are the hands and feet for Hunger Free Philippines. We do the fundraising here in the United States, and then we bring it to the Philippines, and we spread out. We have all the volunteers in the Philippines, and we spread it out to their community where they know their community. So what we do is have the church get to know their neighborhood, their community, so that they can bring them to the church, and we provide the physical of it, and the church would provide the spiritual sense of it, and that's pretty much what we do. It's pretty fair and simple.
Hey y'all, I'm Taylor Smith, and it's my wife Hannah. We pioneered YWAM South Dallas around 5 years ago, and so we have there's YWAM all over the world, and everyone, there's amazing ministries that YWAM is doing everywhere, and we feel a specific call to mobilize and train the inner city community into missions. And so specifically raising up young people from the neighborhood of South Dallas, Fair Park. So if you're ever going over to the fair, that's kind of our area. And so we ran our first discipleship training school last year with 5 students from the neighborhood, which was a big deal for us to actually train and equip young people. So our kind of tagline is like neighborhoods to the nations, right? So we're calling that community, giving an invitation, removing barriers to actually help people step into their calling, know who they are, and see them take steps of faith that they'll carry with them the rest of their life. So it's in its infancy, but it's fun. It's hard work.
Thank you, Taylor. We appreciate you guys and all that you do and your commitment, and grateful. Okay, so let's get into some of these questions. With so many needs in the ministry you're leading or a part of, how do you focus on staying healthy emotionally, spiritually, and physically? So, Taylor, you got the mic down there. You can start on that end.
Sure. Yeah, so it's a great question. You know, when we first moved into the community, we just moved in with our 2 little kids. We have 4 now, but we just bought a house in the middle of the neighborhood in 2019 and just kind of were open-handed saying, what do you want us to do here, right? And then you saw, specifically in this sort of inner city community, there were so many needs, so many things going on. You could spend your whole life every day doing something. And out of that is when we really started to pray and say, okay, God, you have a specific, you called us here, so what's the specific call for us? And that's what I just shared of saying, it's not just serving the community, but calling the community to come be a part of the Great Commission, right? To make disciples within the community. And so because of that, we really have, we've had different staff join us along the way. And one of the things that we've really valued is saying, man, we don't want to be one of those people that work every day so hard, because every time you step out your door, you're like, man, I met with needs every day. So how do we not be the people that burn out in 3 years, and then what did we do? And so this was maybe 4 years ago that a mentor of ours really challenged us one time, said, hey, what does your Sabbath look like? And we're kind of like, sometimes it's good, right? And he said, if you want to last 2 more years where you're doing, you need to start Sabbathing. And if you don't, you can call me for recovery when you're done, right? And that was a hard, strong word, but it really set our family on a different trajectory of saying, man, do we trust God enough to do the work in the 6 days, and we partner with him and fully trust him on the 7th day, that we just rest and say, this is up to you. We're not here to, this all depends on you. And so that really kind of introduced us into practicing some more of the spiritual disciplines. So Sabbath being the first one that we really took hold of, and then doing fasting weekly, right, as just a part of our rhythm. And then once a month, we set aside the last Friday of every month for everyone on our staff to take a day of silence and solitude and say, and what I've found to be in that time, right, it's not an extended quiet time, but it's a time to be I need to remove myself from this situation. And what's interesting is oftentimes it's not what God tells you to step into during silence and solitude, it's what he tells you to stop doing. He says, man, you've picked up so many of these extra things that I never asked you to pick up. And I found that just forcing myself, that last Friday of the month, being all right, I need to meet with the Lord, and he reveals things that have helped us to really be sustainable. So
That's a good one. Well, for me personally, emotionally, I have to check in my heart regularly of what it is that it's helping the calling that God has given me, or is it hurting it? So I do that regularly on an emotionally, and then physically I try to do walks just to go out there and be in the nature. Try to be. I can't say that about food though. I mean, I love food, so that's out the door. But physically, I would try to do walking at least, and spiritually, that's a non-negotiable. It would be worship, pray and worship, because that's when really God can tell me intimately where I am. I always try to have that, what do you call it, gauge, because without that spiritually, I'm lost physical and emotional. That's how I reflect.
Yeah, I think those are really great things. We, for a time, had on Mondays, we'd take 15 minutes and we'd get on Zoom and we'd just sit in silence, just a way to quiet out the demands of the calendar, and so that we were acting intentionally rather than reactively. So I think those are all great things. For me, I think the thing that I try to keep in mind a lot, and I don't know if it's your struggle, but it is mine, to try not to confuse being involved in spiritual work with having spiritual life. There's so much that we do that is parallel to and alongside spiritual practice. We pray together. I talk to people in churches all the time. I'm connecting our mission to the kingdom and to the call that we have. So there's a lot of practice in my work that's spiritual work. And I can be tempted after a long day and a long week and all that to just let that be enough, that was also my spiritual life. And so just trying to make sure that I'm carving out space to connect with the Lord in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with Poema, in ways that are just, who am I? Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? Has been a really important part of staying healthy while doing this work.
Thank you, guys. Great input. I think a lot of your responses ties in with how do we view God? Do we view him as a harsh judge that we're in a courtroom, or do we view him like a loving father in the living room? And if our view of God is that way, which it sounds like for you guys it is, then it's always an open invite. Am I doing something wrong? Good? So he's always inviting us into the living room, right? In his presence to spend time with him, love on us and encourage us. And so I appreciate y'all's perspective. Okay, second question. Do you ever feel like you are unable to make the kind of impact you would like to in the area of ministry that you're in? If so, how do you reconcile this? Bobby?
Sure. Yeah, all the time. Wake up feeling that way sometimes. For me, it has been really helpful to try to think about call in the way that I would think about a tithe. That God doesn't call me to tithe or to serve out of a lack, out of a hole that only I can fill or something that only my finances can do, but that God calls me into ministry work in a lot of ways because of what it does in me, and the person that he's shaping me to be, and out of abundance and a joy to include me in the work that he's already doing. And so that has been a really helpful mindset shift to try to really take it out of my own hands to feel like I'm the one that's making a difference. Like I'm just riding the coattails. I just get to participate and watch the Lord work. And use some of the giftings that he's given me in ways that are really joyful and fun and in really dark places. And so I think for me, that's been the thing, is I try not to let it sit on my shoulders as though, there's a verse that's like, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. And unless the watchman watches the city, or unless the Lord watches the city, the watchmen watch in vain. Like I just keep that in my mind all the time, that at the end of the day, God gives the growth and God does the work, and I just get to come along for the ride.
That's a good one. That's really pretty much what I have to answer also. Absolutely. I think almost every day, especially when we got back from the Philippines last couple of months ago, we feel overwhelmed. But at the same time, because you cannot not ignore the numbers. And as much as I wanted to put it under the rug that there's 13 million hungry experiencing hunger in the Philippines. That's 13 million. That's a lot, and it's overwhelming for me every time I think about it. I have to say it. I have to say it. I have to let everybody know that's the number. Only for them to people who's listening or wanting to know what we're doing. I got to put that number out. But me personally, it's hard for me because it's overwhelming. But at the same time, God convicted me a long, long time ago. He said, I didn't ask you to feed those 13 million. I asked you to share that number, and I asked you to feed just one, and that's obedience. So as long as I feel like I'm in that track to where it's very comfortable in my heart and peaceful that I'm doing His will, He's gonna do the impact. Numbers is His, it's not mine.
That was a good point. That was real good.
You state the question again.
Yes. Do you ever feel like you are unable to make the kind of impact you would like to in the area of ministry you're in? If so, how do you reconcile this?
Yeah. Can you hear me? There it is. Yeah, I kind of alluded that a bit at the beginning of knowing what God called us to specifically and trying to be faithful to that. And if I were to get really practical, for my situation specifically, there's a lot of young men, young boys that might look to me to step in certain ways in their lives. And it's one of those where I can get quickly overwhelmed by, I have 4 of my own kids, and then you've got, we keep getting more and more kids, right? And I can remember saying, Lord, like, I can't do this. Like, there's too many. And feeling there was some really cool strategy that He even gave of just being able to ask God in the details of, okay, will you highlight which 3 young men you want me to pour into right now, and how long, and what does this look like? And when I start to ask Him in the details and listen to His voice, instead of me just feeling overwhelmed by the burden, because once again, when you start, it's not always what He says to do, it's what He says not to step into that I found that helps you to not feel so overwhelmed. Because that's what He promises, right? Like when we follow Him, the yoke is easy, the burden is light. And so if we're just being obedient to what He's asking us to do, I find that it's not quite so overwhelming. However, at the same time, there is a burden that should strike our hearts to be like, have that sort of like, oh, I need to wake up every day and do something, right? Like, I'm a part of this. For some reason, God called us to be a part of this. And so I'm not taking this approach where I'm like, oh, not my responsibility. But yeah, you want to be, I think for me, just listening to the voice of the Lord is so important for knowing what to do and reconciling when things don't go well. Even some of those people that we've walked with for years, and you feel like you were faithfully obedient to what He said, and then it just ends in a way where you're like, what happened, right? And you're left with, this didn't end in the fairy tale story I was hoping it did. And He goes, were you faithful? Were you obedient to what I called you to? And for this season. And you have to trust me that I'm going to take what you did, because it's ultimately not about us. It's about what He's doing in someone's life. And so those are just some of I have a lot to say about that. I feel like there's lots of disappointments. But some of the practicals that I've found to be helpful, so.
Yeah, that's the follow-up question, the disappointment. So, Joe, you can answer that next. We all face those, right? We all face disappointments. And so how do we respond to that? I remember when I was at Reconciliation Outreach, and we had a guy going through our men's program, really doing well. And my dad had passed away, and I got his tools, And do I need to hold this closer? Or? Yes. And I got his tools. And so, it's pretty cool to get your dad's tools, but he had some impact tools. And I didn't have air compressor, didn't use impact tools to work on vehicles and stuff. And this guy was training to be a mechanic, and I thought, man, I'm going to invest those impact tools. I don't know, it's probably a couple $1,000s worth of impact tools. So I just gave them to him. The next day he's gone, and I'm like, and I think it was part of that. I'm trying to help everybody. I don't even know if I heard the Lord do that. I mean, my heart of compassion was out there, but I don't know if I got that specific, direction from the Lord. And I was like, dang, and I could have gone to pawn shops around or whatever, but let it go. So, Joe, how do you deal with disappointment when things don't work out?
Man, how do I deal with this one? I just quit, man. Just go home and leave it. Well, I think as a nonprofit organization, we hit disappointments quite a lot. And so you have to go back to why you're doing it. Yeah. And that's the reason. When you go back to why you're doing it, you got hit with God instantly. And it's pretty simple. Like I mentioned before, God said to me, feed the hungry. And part of the reason why I'm so compassionate about, my husband and I are very compassionate about feeding the hungry in the Philippines. It's just because, I've experienced to be hungry. I know what it's like to be hungry. And a lot of those people that are hungry, they're not, it's not by choice like we are here. We have the privilege here in America to choose not to eat, right? Not in the country like the third world country. I'm pretty sure some of you guys been in the third world country. If you are, they eat once or twice a day. And just imagine just one meal that you give you'll be able to provide for them. It's like, it is an answered prayer for most of them. And having that combination of and these are God's people. They're living in that, underneath the bridge, homeless, that are underserved, way underserved. And I truly feel that that's the reason why God brought me here in America, so that I can, believe it or not, I never thought about this, to go back in my home country where I thought I would leave behind and forgotten all about it. And now he's bringing me back there with +1, thank God, to go with me, alongside me, to work on it. But to answer your question is, remember why God gave it to you, and just be obedient to what God has given you. And the verse that I always remember and so dear to my heart is Galatians 6:9. Keep doing good, because in due time a harvest is coming if you don't give up. And that I stay on that every day. It's kind of like my mantra every day. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm here in America. I'm grateful that I'm able to provide for them. And I'm grateful that I have community and volunteers who serve alongside us. And they're the one who's doing the spiritual side of it for us. And being able to be the hands and feet of what Christ looks like. Not for them to take, just for one day, take them away from that environment where they are treated, in essence, a king and queen. Because that's what God wants, is for us to be special, for them to be special. And so I just always just put that in my brain every time, and I'm in a la la land after that.
I think for me, the thing that's been really important is to expand the timeline on which I'm thinking. That, a momentary disappointment here doesn't mean that it's a definitive, long-lasting disappointment. Like, the Lord weaves and shapes and does his work in ways that I don't expect. And so, if we, made a hard pitch and tried to get somebody to come in and support, and their initial answer was no, that doesn't mean that 2-3 years from now they're not going to show back up and want to be a part of what we do, right? And it could be that initial pitch is just what the Lord was kind of working on and tweaking on and pushing on over the years to finally draw them back in. I think about my kids, and I have 4 also, which is golly.
Just a little starter family.
I just look around and I'm like, where did my time go? But thinking about their growth and like how many conversations I had with my son about this particular issue over the last 4 or 5 years, and then he shows up one day and he has had an epiphany about this particular issue, and it's everything I've been telling him for 4 years, but like he just miraculously discovered it, and so like that I try to keep, the Lord's ways are above my ways. His plans are better than my plans. He is working in ways that I can't see. And so I'll just show up and do the next thing that's in front of me and trust that the Lord will do what he needs to with it.
Good, thank you. Good, Rich. I was being smart. I have 11 children, so when he says 4 children, I was like, it's just a starter family. So I think several things you guys said, so rich, but not sure which one, but referred to what's our mentality in meeting needs anyway. If we have an abundance mentality, which that's the mentality of the gospel, he's able, there's enough, he has enough. But if we have more of a lack or poverty mentality even, then it puts it on our backs to try to make it happen. And so, I think just keeping that in mind sets us free from like these ministries becoming like a bondage, because it's not our ministry, and he's got all the resources in the world, so. Okay, third question. What keeps you motivated to stay involved in the ministry you serve? Bobby, you want to keep going?
Sure. That's a really good question. For me, I think the whole reason that I got involved in Poema in the beginning was this belief that, if you kind of put yourself in the places where kind of the edges of the kingdom are advancing, that it's kind of selfish. You get to be a part of some really cool things. You get to see some really cool things. And for me, I think just the continuous opportunity to see the Lord make good on his promise that he brings death to life, that he brings beauty from ashes, that he is a God who shines light in dark places. That's enough for me.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
What keeps me motivated? Well, this really instantly came to mind, and I'll give you a little bit of a short story. And this is the one that keeps me motivated every time I say this story. And I don't know if I can say it really nice and descriptive, but this is how it is. There's this little boy going down the really nice beach with millions of starfish right on the shore, right? You know that story? And he just keep picking that up, keep one starfish throwing back out to the sea. And finally people are looking, and so finally this one old man who came up to him and said, hey, what are you doing? And this little boy said, well, I'm throwing the starfish back to the sea so he can survive, right? And the little boy and the young man said, you cannot possibly make a difference because there's millions of starfish right here up the shore. The little boy was a little sad. Just for a second, he'd go down again, pick up the starfish, and throw it back. And he looked back to the guy and said, he made a difference on that one. Mm-hmm. So that alone to me, that's how I felt in the beginning when I started Hunger Free Philippines. There's, like I said, there's 13 million hungry, but only one. All I gotta do is we just feed one. And it made a big difference in that one person. And we don't know what impact that might become the president of the Philippines someday.
Yeah.
We don't know. But being able to be in a place, the opportunity for us to plant that seed and be the one who throw that back to the ocean, that's a motivation right there.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Guys have some good answers. Yeah, I think, I just feel like if I can make this story not about myself and be like, this is God's story, and I get to be a part of it, and who am I that I get to do what you're asking me to do? And I've found that, there's maybe those initial, it's always hard to obey Jesus, right? Like, he asks us to do hard things. But over time, the more you obey him, the more you're like, there's nothing I would rather do than obey you. And it actually draws me into an intimate relationship because I know you're real. I see you moving, and I just love spending time with you. And so, what's funny is, like, we got into missions 11 years ago, and we were fully committed to be long-term missionaries in the Middle East when God said, no, I want you to move into the inner city. And you're like, what in the world? And, we're always kind of trying to grasp at, like, the why. And it is good to, like, work towards those things. But at the end of the day, the thing that keeps me motivated and the thing that I wake up to is, like, I just want to be wherever Jesus is. And I want to be as close to him as possible. And if he's inviting me into this, then I'm in. And I know he'll equip me to do it. But I don't even really care what I'm doing as long as I'm with you. And so that's kind of how we've really, you get so caught up in the mission, but, at the end of the day, you're like, if I don't love Jesus, like, or if this drives me to a point where I'm not close with him anymore, then what am I doing? And so I find that when I take care of that first, it seems like everything just sort of flows out of that place, and I don't have to, like, stir myself up too much. He has enough burden for my community that it's like I just release whatever he's given me. So
That's good. That's good. Yeah, absolutely. So then how does your ministry or you guys measure success?
yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's a great question. We actually wrote this down. We kind of, in the foundation of our ministry, we were talking about this question a lot, right? Because a lot of people step into inner city ministry, and sometimes it's like, we're not seeing much fruit, right? And so you can't measure it by fruit, but you're measuring by faithfulness to what God's called you to. Yeah. And then that was it too, right? Like, and I just have this, you can't control what your kids end up doing, right? Like, this is just, they have to make their own choice. But I so badly want to come to the end of whenever this, assignment from the Lord is, and say, are we more in love with you today than we were at the start? Or did this push me to the edge? And I want my kids to, like, really see that we just love Jesus above all things. And so that's our heart for our staff. That's like anyone who joins us, it's like, hey, you might give your life to this, but at the end of your time serving with us, do you love Jesus more? Did you know him more? Because that's what ultimately we're inviting anybody into, is that relationship. And so if we're not cultivating for ourselves, what are we inviting them into? So that's our aim. We'll see in time, right?
So how do we measure it? It depends. It depends on with the worldly part of it, we measure it by numbers. And that's the practical way. That's how we measured it. But in spiritual, I measure it through their testimonies, their stories, the transformation that God has done in their lives. But honestly, in reality, there's no measurement because God's way is higher than ours. Just be obedient. Be obedient to what God has called me to do, a day at a time, and do the best I can That's my measurement. That's how, so I can't really give the specific measurements because for me, I took that out already. That having that measurement, my measurement is what God gives me today and how I can be faithful for that today. Now, with the numbers, I'll give you the numbers. This if that's the measurements that people wanted, but in a spiritual sense, so realms, it's the testimonies on how did God meet you through your ministry, through your calling. How did they make you how did they feel? Did they meet Jesus through you? Did they make you did you make them special and bring the glory and honor to God? That's measurements to me.
Good. Thank you, Joe.
I mean, mostly just what they said, right? I do think one thing I try not to be afraid of is quantification. The Bible has numbers. The Bible says there were 4,000 fed, there were 5,000 fed, that at Pentecost there were 3,000 who were saved, right? The Bible keeps some of those things, and I don't think it's wrong of us to quantify the work that we're doing. For us, we would say we've educated more than 36,000 people. We've helped recover almost 500 missing kids. We've had 35 women in our safe house. So the numbers tell a story that I think it's worth it for us to hold on to and to think through. But they don't tell the whole story, right? At our safe house, we would say any morning that one of our residents wakes up and chooses to stay in the safe house and continue with the program rather than going back to is a successful day, right? Any kid who sees their face on a poster and picks up the phone and is a successful day. And it doesn't matter that maybe that kid's going to run away 3 or 4 more times before they finally get to a place where they feel safe. I'm in development, so I raise money. And so there's a lot of metrics that I'm tracking all the time, and it's hard not to define myself by those. But at the end of the day, I think the question that I keep asking is, with today and with the time that I had, did I do everything that I knew how to do to take that step forward of where the Lord was calling me? And if I can say yes to that, then I feel successful. And if I can't say yes to that, then I know I have more work to do. And just, in fundraising alone, like, it's really interesting to see how, like, the same process with multiple different people can yield very different results, and, somebody will respond to that so well, and they'll give us a whole lot of money, and they'll come and support us, and I'll follow the exact same pattern with somebody, and they're like, I don't think so, right? And so just knowing that, like, the Lord is also involved in touching hearts and drawing people allows me not to put so much value in those numbers.
That's good. I think, Joe, you used the word transformation. And so for me, it's like somebody's getting transformed. Their life's getting transformed. Sometimes it's me, right? Because I'm dealing with the situation. So like you said, Taylor, where God's working on me, it's a real messy situation, and he's working in my heart to posture myself to receive whatever the Father wants to do in my heart. And if that's happening, maybe the situation stays messy, but am I being transformed, or is it tightening me up? Is it causing stress, anxiety, that kind of thing? So, but I agree with Bobby. And I think the key is, especially for smaller nonprofits, is how do you translate that transformation to people that you want to invest into the ministry? If you're not at a place where you have as many clear metrics or whatever, because transformation sometimes is most of the time, maybe, can we say, is real messy, and sometimes takes a long time, So y'all are shaking your head like, you feel what I'm talking about. As my friend said, you smell what I'm stepping in. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. Do you feel like you are encouraged on a regular basis? And if so, how? Anybody, jump in.
Do you feel like you're encouraged on a regular basis, and how?
With all honesty, it's a choice. It's a choice. You can, because when you do a meditation, and spending time with God, that's when I believe that he would truly put you in a place where there's openness and transparency, and you put yourself to where are you being encouraged or not, and you choose that on a daily basis. For me, I choose to be encouraged, and if I don't get, if I'm discouraged, I have tons of friends that I can call to and be vulnerable with them and get their encouragement. So I feed off the people that really supports what I do, and just support me for who I am. That's how I get encouraged. Every day we spend time with the people that loves you no matter what, and stay connected with them. More so, of course, with God, because really the ultimate how I stay encouraged is just having that moments of ceasing, unrelenting, having conversation with God. Okay, of asking and whine. Well, not whining because God does not whine. That's not like whining, but just talking to Him and giving your whatever it is, really, because He can handle it. So that's how I encourage myself.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, it's funny that question. And I would need to look into like the linguistics of this a bit, but we've been talking about the word encourage, and I just broke it apart in two pieces. It's like encourage. So what does it mean to encourage? Like to put in courage, to actually take the step to be courageous, and so I feel like that happens in a lot of ways. I think you touched on, like, are we willing to receive, some of the identity words that the Lord has spoken to me that I've put on a little card that I put on my mirror, and I looked at myself in the mirror and say, like, I'm going to speak in courage to myself. Like, I'm going to put courage into myself today through those words that the Lord has given me. And I find that that's really helpful. Listening to that voice, listening to some of those key things that he said, right? Like how many times did he say to Joshua, like, this is who you are. Don't be afraid. I'm with you, right? Like he's encouraging him. And then in the same way from like a ministry organizational thing, like, I mean, this lunch is a great example. Like you have to choose to come here, but we can spend so much time pouring out that we never let ourselves be encouraged, right? Like, we do different staff development stuff where we bring in different speakers and just say like, man, we need to be encouraged. Like we need another voice to speak into us. And so, yeah, I think it's, God asks us all to do hard things, right? And so we need the body of believers to lift each other up to actually step into some of those.
That's really good. Yeah, I think that, well, I'm not going to add to that. I think you guys really appreciate your wisdom and input and insight on that. And if we think we don't need encouragement, we're not being real honest, because all of us need that. So if I've got a team together pretty regular, I'll stop and, hey, say to the person on your right what you appreciate about them or what you're encouraged for them, and just go around the horn. And it makes some people a little nervous. But when you get through, you can sense the spirit in the room just bringing encouragement to people. So I think that's important for all of our teams and those we work with. Well, hey, do you have any questions or follow-up for our, yes?
So I'm real encouraged by the group today. You guys did an awesome job.
Yes.
I'm encouraged by you guys. Jim, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really good, successful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Josephine, you said that you came to America, that you can go and help the Filipinos. I thought you came for me.
Wow.
No,
You want to plead what do you do? Plead the fifth or whatever it is?
truthfully, I was one of those starfish that she threw back in the water. She saved my life.
Wow.
I'm glad to be a part of this.
So thank you, Stephen. Thank you. So cool. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other comments or questions? Yes. Kevin.
We do what we do because we care. That's why we said yes to the Lord. One of the three
Good question. You want to respond to that?
So the question was, caring sometimes hurts?
Yeah, and what do we do when
what
it
do you do when
hurts?
it hurts?
Yeah.
I think we're honest that it hurts. One of the things that I would add to the encouragement that, Rebecca, our founder, Rebecca Jowers, has done a phenomenal job of building an organization that centers around people rather than function, right? So when we do our staff meetings, the first hour a lot of times is just personally, where are you and what's going on in your life and how can we pray for you and how can we lift you up? Before we ever get to business, before we ever get to like what needs to happen, it's a lot about investing in each other. And in ministry, there's you run into obstacles and hindrances, and there is an enemy, and there's all those things that you're kind of fighting your way through. And so to have people who are arm in arm with you, even just to say like, yeah, I know it hurts and that's heavy, to kind of bear one another's burdens, right, is what we're called to do. And so for us, I think rather than just putting on the fun, happy face because this is ministry and we're supposed to love it because we're involved in it, but like just admitting that this was a hard thing and we're going to need a moment to regroup and we're going to give it to the Lord and trust Him that He's enough, even when we feel like we're being called to kind of run into the wall over and over again.
That's good. Thank you.
So what do you do when you get hurt? You get help and you get healed. That's the first thing for me. You seek out, first and foremost, why is it hurting? Hurt is not always negative. There are some positive on hurting, but if it is some negative sense, then you seek and get help and find people that's been there before to help you recover. That's what I would do when you get hurt. Now, if it is hurting because you're wanting it so much to help others, you're so overwhelmed, be mindful to trust God. He got it. God loves those people, hurts for those people more than we do. And to be able to trust Him with that and trust on your ability and capabilities to do what God has asked you of, then let it be.
Yeah, I'd just say one quick thing. I feel like a phrase that we sometimes talk about in terms of this is love being worth the risk. And you look at, we'd say that in terms of like a romantic thing, like, oh, it's worth it. But when you really think about what God does, and He invites all of us into a relationship, and most people are saying no thanks, right? And He gave everything. And the amount of hurt, like for Him, that He experiences by all these people, all His children rejecting Him, it should, when we say, okay, I need to tap into that love, like I need to, because this apparently can overcome any pain, any challenge. When people keep hurting us, it's like He still laid down His life while we were still sinners, right? And so I think to me, everything you guys are saying, really good, practical, and then if I have to live by if I want to put we've been hurt by some people, and there's certain people that come right back up to me, and I'm like, man, this reminds me of the exact same situation. And I look at Lord, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I don't want to do this again. Like, how that last one ended. And, He just reminded me, like, I have more than enough love. And this is what I've done for everybody, right? And so you tap into something deeper that keeps propelling you forward. Doesn't mean it's easy, but there is power there, and that's amazing. So
That's good. Hey, can you give a hand clap to our panel? Yeah.